Hey everybody, welcome to the Downtown Community Church podcast. I am your host and executive pastor, William Colley, and I am joined by your lead pastor, Mr. Register Sausage himself, Benjamin Kempfer.
He is our executive pastor, our worship pastor, our groups and discipleship pastor, and right now my man is sporting a brand new fresh haircut. So I'm excited to be on the pod today.
Got to get that Christmas cut in, man.
You do, and New Year's cut.
Oh yeah, it's true, New Year's. Awesome. Well, so glad you guys are here. We are releasing this podcast on December 29th. We always take the last Sunday of the year off from gathering as a church. It kind of gives our team a break, allows them to spend time with their family and friends. So hope you guys are enjoying that as well.
Yeah, we are. Sometimes people ask, like, oh, why do you guys take the end of the year off? In part, and they say, well, actually, how they say it is, oh, so you guys aren't going to have church? And it's you always get to be able to have the witty theological response of, well, we are the church. We're just not gathering together. We want you to gather together with your family. So we hope that you guys are doing that. And if you are listening to this on Sunday, have a blessed Sunday. And if you are listening to this at some other part of the week or the year, then glad you're tuning in.
Yeah, love it. Well, awesome. I'm really excited about today. So as we kind of were discussing what we're going to talk about today, we kind of landed on a subject that we haven't talked about publicly as a church, and that is our core values as a church. So, Ben, why don't you kind of get us started, I guess, on how DCC started, when the core values were developed. I'm sure it was before we even launched, right?
Yeah, so the idea behind this in core values, so we go over this actually in our Welcome to Church class. So we're not going to go over all of our core values today, but if you hear some of this and it is intriguing to you and you haven't been through Welcome to DCC or Welcome to Church, I'm sorry, if you haven't been to Welcome to Church yet, then you should. In fact, everybody who calls DCC their home church should go through Welcome to Church because it really talks about some of the nuances and the details that are actually really helpful and interesting and to know how we think through a whole list of different things. But specifically in our core values, so we started as a church 7 or 8 years ago, Bible study, nomadic, and throughout the years we've really tried to kind of unearth what makes DCC DCC, what makes us unique. And it's really difficult to do that. And if you're in charge of an organization or a company, then you know that this is really difficult to do because the things that are unique in particular to you are not self-evident to you. They're just what you do, right? Yeah. And so we call these core values. They define our culture, their cultural distinctives. And what we mean by that is it's not something that we think should be common to every church. It's just things that are very common in the DNA of who we are as a church. So for instance, we think prayer is absolutely vital and core to a church and to the entirety of the church. The reason that's not listed in this is not because we don't think core or prayer is not core. It's just it doesn't distinctly define the culture of our church from other churches. We think all churches should pray. Honesty, that's a core value, right? But come on, if we're not being honest as a church, then should we even be a church at that point? So these are the things, but it was difficult for us because as we tried to name them and describe them, it's the question of how is this different? How is this not normal? And really the question that we landed on to try to figure this out was if we created DCC number 2, if we just uprooted and created a second campus, a third campus, a fourth campus, or a third church or a fourth church, what would we walk in and want to see? What would we walk in and if we thought if that wasn't there, this wouldn't feel like DCC? It wouldn't feel like home to us, basically.
No, that's good, and I think because of that, it took us a long time. It probably 3 years we talked about.
We
this
went through
before.
so many lists of different things and different ideas and thoughts, and what do you think about that? And what do you think about that?
Yeah.
And so the story of how you remember the story of how we actually ended up with this?
I don't.
Really?
No, I don't think so.
All right. So real quick. So we actually were in my living room. And we had a list of about 20.
Oh, I do remember this. Yeah,
and
you and Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff, William, and I were all sitting down, and we had about 15 to 20, and we kind of condensed them into, well, I think we had 20. We condensed them into 15. Yeah. And then we just had a round-robin tournament where William picked one, Jeff picked one, I picked one, William picked one, Jeff picked one, I picked one. And what we figured was if it wasn't in the top 3 of what I would pick, you would pick, or Jeff would pick, which would give us 9 total. So you couldn't repick somebody else's. If it wasn't one of our top 3 individually, then it probably wasn't that core.
Yeah.
So that is how we landed at our 9 core value cultural distinctives as a church, as we just had a
I forgot about that. Yeah.
bowl pick'em type of thing.
That's awesome. I think one of the reasons why, like what you said, why it took a little while for us to do it was there was some things that happened that they would go on and we'd be like, I don't like that. We'd be like, that doesn't feel like us, And then we were able to figure out, okay, no, that's because it's core to who we are, that kind of distinctive. So,
right. Let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
So since we've defined these, how would you, because I think this was a part of the process, you've got to define what our core values, what is culture, right? If these are our cultural core values, how would you define that?
How would I define culture? So I think the best way to put it is it's the underlining beliefs, assumptions, and values that we have as a church. So I think the key word there is underlining.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be the mission statement put on the wall. It's not going to be something that's just plastered everywhere that's on a T-shirt or whatever, but it's just kind of like, it's in that undertone of what we do.
It really creates the feel of the church.
Yeah,
you walk
exactly.
in and every church, again, could believe in prayer, go, love God, make disciples, be great neighbors.
Yeah.
But they're going to feel totally different. So this creates kind of I walk in this place feels like home. It feels distinct. So these are a lot of those things.
No, that's good.
Now, second question. I'm putting you on the hot spot
I
for
like
this. Why? Why is defining this important, right? Because then it's just like, oh, look at us. We're cool. We're individual. We're unique, right? So, like, this isn't to say, oh, my gosh, we're so cool. But there was a specific reason we felt like we need to define this for us. So tell us about what that reason is.
Yeah, so the big reason is it is possible to deny with our culture what we declare with our message.
I love it. Go on.
So it's possible for us to say this is what I believe, but our actions actually, we living that out?
Yeah, and I think that's it. The reason that's key is because you can declare with your message, hey, everyone is valuable. Everyone has a gift that is uniquely wired to do something for the kingdom of God. Yet we create it where only a system, an organization, or a culture where only a couple of people actually get to use their gifts, right? Everybody's not empowered to. We can create a culture that says, hey, this is a place where it's safe to explore faith. This is a place where we have no presumptions of who you are. We just want you to come and experience the teachings and the words of Jesus. And we want to introduce you to him. This is a place where it's safe to not be okay.
Yeah.
Yet, when somebody confesses sin, we panic.
Are you kidding
we
me?
freak out. Yeah, and so we're declaring with our message, this is a place where it's okay to acknowledge your brokenness. When somebody acknowledges their brokenness, we totally go in the other direction. So we would declare with our message, but then in our actions, it's just something totally different.
Yeah. Yep, that's why it's so important. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. We're going to go through a handful of these. Like I said, we're not going to go through all of them, but that's why you should go to Welcome to Church.
Hey.
So the first one, Ben, why don't you kind of explain this? I think this is when we had our draft, this was all around number one. We're not going to
number one draft pick.
Yeah.
LeBron James.
Anyway. Genuine is number one draft pick.
Yeah. So genuine. Now this was, this is hard to emphasize this too much for us.
For sure.
So the written statement that we have about this, or the way that we would articulate this, is that we're the same people Monday through Saturday as we are on Sunday. We don't feel a need to project who we wish we were. Instead, we want to be real, sincere, and authentic, or as we say, genuine. So this is the idea that if I walk into a coffee shop, let's just say I'm going to Lucky Goat because that's classic, right? Let's just say I'm feeling very benevolent and I go to Red Eye. Well, if I walk in, we want our church to be the same people, whether they are greeting in the parking lot, whether they are sitting in a row, whether they're on stage, or they're in the coffee shop, or they're in the accounting and finance meeting at their company, right? I mean, we want people to be the same, and especially as leaders, we want to be the same. My goal is when I'm having conversations with people in the lobby, maybe, I'm having a conversation with someone, and then I get up on stage and I'm like, oh, that dude was the pastor? Like, I thought he was just like a rando that just struck up a conversation. Because the truth is like, man, we're people. And I think behind that is a thought that I want people to not see me or you or any of us as elevated, but just to see us as normal, broken people who are pursuing Jesus and living for him. And if I can do this, there is nothing super special, super spiritual about me. It's just a broken sinner telling another broken sinner, hey, let's all go find Jesus together, right?
No, for sure. Yeah, this is, I think, bar none, the top, one for us, I think. And I think you do such a great job of this in the way you communicate. We've all heard that pastor, been a part of that church where it's like the preacher voice. It's like you talk to him like off stage, and then he gets on stage and he's like, brothers. I'm like, oh gosh. If he greeted me like that, like at Lucky Goat, that would be really awkward.
Yeah, you start saying words that you would never say and in a tone that you would never say it, and it's like, who is this weirdo?
Definitely, yeah. So I love that, and I think hopefully that is a distinction of our culture.
Let me ask you this. How have you seen that make a difference? Off the cuff, so if it takes a second to answer, my fault.
Yeah, no. I think...
but we're just being genuine here.
Such a dork. Man, honestly, I think over the years, we've built relationships with people, and they've, over time, kind of got involved with our church, and they're like, man, you guys are just normal.
I love that.
And not just us, but like Delaney, our kids director, like she's so great at that. Or Monica, like with Hope, like it's just, hey, you guys are just normal people. And I just enjoy hanging out with you. And I think that's so important, and I think hopefully when people come through our doors that don't know us beforehand, they get that feeling as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, so I'm going to put you on the hot spot for this one.
Cool.
So this one is a little bit specific to your ministry area, but it is the core value and the cultural distinctive that circles are better than rows. Circles are better than rows. Explain what that means to us.
Yeah, so we love to kind of say circles are better than rows, and circles being community groups and or what we call community groups, so then rows being Sunday morning rows. And so we really think inspiration happens on a Sunday morning, but sustained life change happens in community together. When you're doing life together with a smaller group of people. I mean, for us, we see, 600-700 people come through the doors each Sunday, and it's impossible for us to really get to know each other and do life together. All of our groups focus around three, kind of tiers, which is we want to care for each other, we want to have biblical direction amongst our group, and we want to hold each other accountable. And that's just not possible on a Sunday morning when, who knows who you're sitting by. But when you get in a circle with a group of people and you're doing life together, it's possible. And so that's why we really think, as great as Sundays are, and they are critical to the life of our church, and but even more important is groups.
Yeah, and I think with that, everybody needs a place where they're known. Everybody needs a place where people know who they are, they know their strengths, they know their weaknesses, they know, and they can have conversations. This would be very similar, and this is not, by the way, to say that like, Sunday is unimportant, because in a lot of ways, Sunday is really helpful in setting the tone. It is a big catalyst for a lot of people in their faith. It pushes us, it challenges us, the direction of the church. There's so many great things that happen on Sunday, but at the end of the day, in virtually any endeavor you do, if you do it in a small group of community, you are exponentially more likely to be successful at the thing that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to, for the new year, you've got a New Year's resolution that you're going to work out more. If you've got a group of people, 4 or 5 friends, and you guys are all working out together, there's this community sense. It's like-minded people going in the same direction. You're just going to be wildly more successful at doing that. And so the same thing applies to Jesus. So, it's, again, not that Sundays are unimportant, but it's that inspiration oftentimes happens there. The tone gets set there.
Yeah.
Direction will get set there. But individual, personalized knownness and life change, I think, is sustained through groups.
Yeah, exactly. And so, hey, if you're not in a group, January is a great time to jump in, man. We're going to be launching groups in a couple weeks.
Step your game up. Let's do it.
Always a time. So, we love that. We think it's critical to the life of our church. So, all right, next one. Why don't you jump into this one a little bit, Ben?
Okay.
Better not bigger.
Yeah, so I love this. And it's not that we don't want to get bigger, it's that bigger is the result of better. So let me explain what all of that means. So this is kind of how we have it stated is for our systems and infrastructure to our Sunday services and outreach, we are constantly striving to get better. We'll experiment, we'll try new ideas, we'll stop old programs that are successful in the pursuit of getting better as a church. So we'll take a program that is somewhat successful if we think that there's potentially a better way to do it. We'll kill something that would be growing to something that we think could grow even better and more exponentially. And the reason is we don't really have a ton of goals around getting bigger, but we are pretty convinced that bigger is the byproduct of getting better. And we're getting better because we believe that God is honored when we bring him our best and do our best and do things with excellence. So the classic story behind this, and I'll share it real quick, is of Chick-fil-A. So heard this is kind of like the handed down to the fifth person or something like this, but this is essentially how the story goes, is a while back when Chick-fil-A was much smaller than it is now, but still a really growing, thriving thing, they didn't consider a lot of the other fast food restaurants, the Wendy's and places, their competition. Because their product was so different. And for the first time ever, they had real competition, and its name was Boston Market. Boston Market had a ton of capital behind it, had a ton of growth. It had a very aggressive expansion plan.
They also have great macaroni and cheese.
Do they?
Oh, yeah. It's delicious.
Nice. So they one day all the Chick-fil-A execs were in the boardroom together, and they were having this conversation of how do we grow, how do we be more aggressive in our expansion. They were trying to probably rearrange capital and free up cash flow and do all this stuff. And they say towards the end of the meeting, Truett Cathy, who was the CEO, was kind of checked out, which was very uncommon for him. But he was getting a little older, so they thought maybe he was just perhaps a thing of age.
Yeah.
And they said towards the end of the meeting, he just starts beating on the table, which was wildly different than what he had done before. Just starts beating on the table. And he said the whole room got dead silent. This is kind of one of their execs was telling the story. And he said, I am sick and tired of talking about how we can get bigger. If we are committed to getting better, our customers will demand that we get bigger. And so for us, that is a huge, huge value that we have.
Yeah.
We don't want to get just bigger. The reason we are committed to making our groups as helpful as they possibly can be to facilitate and accommodate and be a catalyst for sustained spiritual growth in the life of each individual is because, man, like these people, these individuals matter. We bring God our excellence. But what we know is if we can do that really well, like people love things that are great. You're right. People are attracted to the things that we want our worship services to be a great representation of who God is, the Bible taught with truth. We want all of those things to happen exceedingly well. But just simply focused on let's put a billboard out and let's hand out 100,000 flyers to our city, let's do all this stuff. We could do all that, or we could just be committed to getting better.
Yeah.
And if we continue to get better, we will, by doing that, add enough value to people that people will bring people. And so similar to a great restaurant at a great deal, oh my gosh, everybody's got to go to this. The same thing happens with church.
Yeah. No, that's great. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Man.
How do we do that? What are some ways that we as a church are constantly striving to get better?
Yeah, so let me micro in on this a little bit. If I can answer that a little bit differently, I'll tell you how I do that.
Okay.
So what I know is that I, as a communicator on Sunday, am constantly preaching and teaching is the thing that's kind of it's kind of the golden calf of church life, right? Like if I'm off on a Sunday, then very few people are gonna be like, dude, that junk was bootleg. That junk was weird, right? And so what I know is because one, since I'm at the top of the org chart, somebody's going to have to challenge their direct report, or somebody's going to have to feel very, irreligious to come to me and say, yeah, that junk was not great. I think you could have made this point stronger or better. And so what I know is that I have got to continue to get better as a communicator, and I've been continually trying to push myself and challenge myself. And so things that I do is, one, I know that I have to invite feedback because I can't expect feedback to come.
For sure.
So every Sunday we have Luke, who is our program director, And Luke's a younger dude. He's, 22, 23 years old,
Yeah.
something like that. Just recently graduated. But we have some of our people on our content team, as well as Luke, fill out a sermon eval form. So it's a 2-page thing. Every sermon I give, we try to have an evaluation on it to say what were the strong points, the weak points, and it's fairly systematic in how we kind of go through and approach it.
Yeah, that's good.
Because I know that I have to continue to get better, or I will be the limiting factor of the church.
Yeah.
But also I know that just doesn't happen on accident. So we evaluate. In fact, it was sweet. One time, Luke and I went to lunch, and he had like a 2-page document of things that he thought that, I want you to think about this, work on this. And for me, I'm like, dude, this is awesome. Like he was reasonably so, a little bit like, I don't know how he's going to take this, but we just don't care about. We don't care about being right. We just want to get it right and get better, right?
Definitely.
And so, man, it's just, we're committed to being people who always receive a feedback, critique, evaluation, ask for feedback and critique and evaluation. And it starts with the sermon, and it goes through everything else that happens in the church. And we're just constantly evaluating to try to get better and better and better.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's really good. I think it reminds, like, this past summer we decided, hey, let's not do groups and let's do classes.
Yeah.
And that's kind of example we kind of said in there of like sometimes we stop things that are successful, to get better. And we felt like, hey, this could be a complete disaster, but we really feel like it's what the church needs, for us to spiritually grow and develop. And it was great.
Yeah, and that was a great leadership call on your part, because that was something where we had never done it before and thought, this might kill the momentum of groups, and it did the exact opposite. But it was your willingness to kind of have the courage to say, let's try it, and let's kill groups for a summer and see what happens.
Yeah,
and it
for
worked.
sure. Hey, appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man, absolutely. All right, so back to you, my friend. Next one that we have, or that I'm going to bring up, is spiritual information and practical application. Spiritual information and practical application. That sounds like an interesting cultural value, core value, but tell us about that.
Yeah, I love it. This one, when it comes to the draft, I think this one maybe was a lower one, but it's so critical. And I think it really does define a lot of who we are. So as we kind of have it written down, Jesus declared that anyone who hears his word, information, and does what he says, application, builds their house on the rock. We believe the Bible is both deeply spiritual and deeply practical. And while we strive for depth, we refuse to separate it from practice. So I think this is great because, and maybe some of you guys, you hear me say that and you're like, yeah, we do that on Sundays. But to us, like, obviously the Bible is the foundation of our faith, and it's the primary way God speaks to us. And so we believe it wholeheartedly. But at the same time, we don't want to just interpret the Bible without any sort of application. We think it's also like deeply practical.
Right.
And so there's ways, anytime we open the Bible and we study God's word, there are ways that it can practically impact and change our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes that's just a mindset, right? Sometimes that's just in our thoughts or how we think about what we think about when we think about God. If I can shift that to be a little more accurate, it'll oftentimes play out in my life. But a lot of this is driven, again, from that Jesus got done with the Sermon on the Mount, right? The greatest oration that we have of anything that he did in his ministry. And he ends it by saying, one person built their house on the sand, one person built their house on the rock. And I used to do this in middle and high school ministry a lot and say, and so what is the rock? And everybody would say, Jesus. And I would say, no, it's action. It's doing what he said, that the person who builds their house on the rock is the person who took these words of mine and did them. And the person who heard these words and did nothing with them didn't. And I think that we try to balance those two things really well.
Yeah, no, for sure. Awesome. Well, last one we're going to do today is ministry to the marginalized. So why is that a core value for us as a church?
Yeah, so this one's interesting because I think every church would agree, right? I think most every church would agree that however you phrase that, missions, ministry to the marginalized, the forgotten, the marginalized, again, is how we say it. But
the orphan and widow.
Yeah, so I think pretty much every church has a component that cares about that.
Definitely.
The distinctive for us, and why we actually decided to include this though again, every church would probably agree,
Yeah.
is because for us, it's a call for the entire church, and not just a committee of the church.
Yeah.
So when Jesus walked the planet, he embodied both a care and an identification with the poor. And James said it's a hallmark of true gospel transformation. And what we realize is that, we don't, when it comes to this, the application might look different for each person, but it's important for every person.
Yeah.
So if you take the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? You've got the person who walked, the Samaritan went, and there was the ministry of the Samaritan who picked the person up. The Samaritan paid, the innkeeper kept, the Samaritan person came back to check and make sure and said if there's anything else that is needed, then I'll pay for that as well.
Yeah.
So there was different roles and different people in different places and different influences, but man, this was central to the heart of the entirety of the church, and that's why we actually are located approximately where we are. Is because we wanted to be. We could have not called it Downtown Community Church and been located in a whole bunch of places. That's real estate would be a whole lot less expensive than ours is. Even though we've got a fantastic deal, by the way, and John, our landlord, is phenomenal.
Shout out.
But the truth is that for us, this isn't a committee. This is the entire church.
Yeah.
We think that the interaction between who it is might change, but this is central to the heart of the church. And the kind of the proof of this, I would say, is in the book of Acts, the apostles realize we need to be committed to prayer and the word, and so we're going to delegate the feeding of the widows and the orphans. Well, about a decade later, Paul comes to him and says, man, I have been called to go make disciples all across the Mediterranean rim. And they extended the right hand of fellowship. And so Paul's excited, like, I'm going to go preach the gospel. I'm going to go preach the gospel. And their only instruction to him was this: do not forget the widows and the orphans. And he said, or do not forget the poor is actually how they said it. And he said, which was the very thing I was willing and wanting to do. Which means a decade removed, they're saying, okay, second behind preaching the gospel is, man, we've got to take care of people. We've got to love people. We've got to serve people who are marginalized, pushed to the side, who have had difficult situations, difficult upbringings, all kinds of things like that. And so for us, this is why we have programs like Hope. This is why we have programs like Project Tallahassee.
Yeah.
This is why we push people constantly to serve in different ways, shapes, and forms and capacities, because this is not a part of the church. This should be central to the mindset of the entirety of the church.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. And it kind of reminds me of when we first started as a church, like homeless ministry was like the thing for us. Like, as some people know, you lived on the streets for a little bit to kind of relate to homeless people. There was a lot of homeless ministry that we did. But over time, we kind of realized this isn't for everybody, but that doesn't mean they can't be involved, with ministry to the marginalized. And so, and the vulnerable. So we kind of, in some ways, kind of expanded our outreach, and that's kind of a lot of ways how Project Tallahassee kind of started, was getting involved with different ministries and nonprofits.
Yeah, and a lot of that, especially at the beginning, was we just didn't know where to start. And homelessness was the most, that's the guy on the corner on the side of the street. And we've refused to define this specific neighbor that we're called to love. That's why in our mission statement, by the way, it says, be great neighbors. In the story of the parable of the Good Samaritan, Jesus ends it not by saying, so this is your neighbor, because that was the question. So who is my neighbor? And so he says, which one of these was a neighbor? He says, now go and do likewise. In other words, I'm not concerned with you identifying who your neighbor is as much as I want you to be a great neighbor. That's why it's central to everybody. But yeah, man, we found out that like in about the same year, we opened as a city, we opened up a multi-million-dollar facility that housed and helped folks that were experiencing homelessness, which is phenomenal. The Kearney Center, man, they knock it out of the park, and it's just wildly impressive. It is very needed. At the same time, on the south side, there was a Boys and Girls Club who closed down that the CEO just a few months before had said within, if you were to draw a mile circle around it, there were over 1,000 juvenile arrests in the past year. And we thought, gosh, Benjamin Franklin said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. We're, as a city, getting involved at the level where there's just incredible intricacy and complexity that's involved in homelessness. But, man, we can help some kiddos, and we can really love and be an asset and really a partner to a lot of the families, and especially single mother, head of household, living at or below the poverty line. Man, we can we're geared as a church and wired as a church with some young people to do a great job of loving and serving that demographic really well. We want to have a voice in that community. So that was kind of like a doorway for us to say, man, where do we really find our sense of focus? So we don't define our neighbor, but we do have a sense of focus to a degree right now because we do want to be aligned for impact.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. All right. Well, I think that's 5 of our 9 core values. So if you want to hear the other 4, or if you have questions about these 5, we would love for you to join us at Welcome to Church. It happens the first 3 Sundays of every month. Sundays at 5 p.m. I probably shouldn't say this because it might change sometimes, and this might be dated, but
Classic.
whatever.
Yeah.
Anyways, as far as January goes, we're actually doing it the 12th, 19th, and 26th.
Something like
that's
that.
right.
That works.
Sundays 5 p.m. It's here. Ben teaches week 1. I teach week 2, and our fantastic connections director Mark Kanjan teaches week 3. So
that was a lot all at the same time with all of those core values. But man, the Welcome to Church, it is a conversational thing where we sit down, have conversations. You can ask questions. Our goal in that entire process is really we want to give you a peek behind the curtains, because we think if before you really commit to a church, you just want to know all about it in the background and who they are, what they're made of. So.
Yeah, I love it. Well, hey, you guys have a great New Year's, and we will see you on Sunday.
Love you guys. Have a wonderful rest of your break.
Peace.